Hi everyone. I was asked by some parents to share about sleep disturbance that's happening now in particular since this pandemic has started. So I thought a good starting point actually is to have you reflect on the amount of sleep your children were getting before to see if that's in line with what is expected. I use Sleep Council's guidelines, but if you look up pretty much any guidelines that are presented by people who research child development, they'll be roughly around this same range. Understand that some children need less sleep, some need much more. So how do you gauge that? First of all, if they're falling in the suggested range for hours a day, and they're older than preschool and still needing long naps, that's a sign that they might be a child who needs more sleep than the average. If you're watching movies and family shows together and they can't stay awake through them and they're well before bedtime, that can be another indicator. Okay, so just kind of gauge their mood and their ability to regulate emotions as well as a guide for if they were getting enough sleep. And then what's odd is because the online learning is where most kids are right now, it might be tempting to let them stay up later or let them sleep in a bit longer. But the recommendation is not to adjust that much. So if you let them stay up later, don't let it be more than 2 hours. That's more than their normal. And I wouldn't make a habit of that. So routines have fallen off, like they're used to being at school and then set routines. That piece is missing. So the one routine you can give them is when they wake up and when they go to bed. So stick with what works for them and don't shift it too much. So parents have mentioned in particular that there's nightmares happening in their children. So I want you to think about this. When we talked about anxiety, we said anxiety at a time like this is quite normal. There's a lot of unknown, and even experts are finding it difficult to give advice that makes all of us feel reassured, right? So we are wired to stay awake when there's danger. So it makes sense that sleep is disrupted now. So let's normalize it a bit, that it's not unusual that they are having difficulties, but there are things we can do to support them, right? Children, well, in general, there's people who study sleep are seeing increases in insomnia, vivid dreams, and nightmares. For children, they're calling these anxious dreams. So what does that mean? Well, they're taking negative events and negative emotions that they're experiencing during the day, and they're trying to process that in their sleep. So if they are hearing something they don't understand about germs, because germs are a really abstract idea, they might incorporate those negative thoughts into a dream, right? And how does that play out with kids? Well, for ones who have parents who are essential workers or loved ones who are essential workers, they might be having dreams about people they love being or know well, being sick, being in the hospital, this type of thing. And for those children and others, there might be this fantastical symbol of the pandemic that's playing out in dreams, right? Again, viruses are really complex to understand. So I had a parent who shared that their child was picturing their sibling being surrounded by these big, huge roaches, and they felt like they couldn't help their sibling. If you think about the symbolism there, that makes sense, right? I don't know. I don't understand what a virus is. I don't know how to protect my family from it. I don't know how to protect myself from that, right? So reassure them that your family is doing what you need to do to keep yourself as safe as possible from the virus. That's important. And the other reason they're remembering these, or you might not have experienced them remembering many dreams before, is that their sleep's disturbed. So they're waking up in that REM cycle, so the dream is quite vivid for them, and they can give you the details. Whereas if their sleep wasn't disturbed, they would process that in their sleep and likely not remember it. So what do we do? I think an important piece, when I talk with teenagers, I always mention about blue lighting and how we should stop and get off our devices well before bed. I'm saying 30 minutes here, but to be honest, I usually recommend much more than that. That lighting on electronic devices and TVs, it isn't helpful for sleep, for sound sleep. And if you are someone who listens to the news while you're cooking and they're playing and you're thinking, well, they're engaged in what they're doing and they're not listening, just remember they're listening most of the time to what's going on in the room around them. So they're listening to your conversations, they're listening to news. And that's a lot of complex ideas that make no sense to them. Okay? So keep those things for after they go to bed. And scary movies, well, movies in general have age guidelines, right? TV shows have age guidelines. They're for psychological reasons. So to say, well, my kid likes scary movies, they might, and they might be saying that because you like the fact that they like them. But developmentally, they're not ready for them. And so, again, that can cause all kinds of disturbances, but certainly with sleep. When you are going to bed, hopefully you have a bedtime routine. And if that's dropped because of all the madness that's happening in your house right now, try to get back to that. And it is important what they're thinking about before they go to sleep. So if they're having really positive thoughts before they go to sleep, their dreams are going to play out in that way. If the last thing they're thinking about before they go to sleep is something scary, then it can have a different impact. So how do you get them thinking about positive thoughts? I love Insight Timer app because there are stories for bedtime, but those stories always start with a mindfulness activity or mindfulness exercise, and so children are often asleep before the story gets too far even underway. I also like Headspace. They have a simple sleep one for kids, and that goes up by different levels. And so mindfulness is a great way to have them fully relaxed and in a good state before they go to sleep. Thinking about their normal relaxing things, so taking a bath or a shower before sleep. Now, for some kids that doesn't work, it hypes them up, so you know your children and what works best for them. Same with yoga or stretching. For some, it would get them wired, so you have to gauge that based on your child's personality. But one thing that it is researched that you can have scents in the room that are quite relaxing, like lavender is a common one. And so it's not just made up and something that people do for no reason. There's research about it. So find the scents. If you look that up, you can find numerous scents that will help with falling asleep. The last thing that I want to share are some other considerations that you might not be thinking about. So one could be that they're not getting the sunlight they're used to during a school day. So they're used to going out at recess, some go out during lunch break, some do sports after school, and all of those things might be a way for them to take in sun. So now if they're sitting inside on devices all day, they might be lacking vitamin D. So get them outside, make sure that's happening. Rough and tumble play is really big for preschool and primary kids, and what that is like the play wrestling that they'll do with parents or with Like they love to do this at school, and it's not fighting. They know that there's a difference, and it's a really physical type of play. So if they're not getting that because they're not in school, you can provide that for them. Wrestle on the bed or on the floor, and then it helps them also to understand boundaries and their sense of space, and so there are a lot of benefits to it. If they're used to playing sports, then they're missing that piece, and it also connects with the last point, which is their connection with peers. So make sure that that exercise is happening in one way or another, even if it's not their favorite type of exercise. And then there's risk-taking that happens at school, and risk-taking is tiring, right? It pushes you past your boundary. So physical risk-taking, like walking on a beam or climbing rocks or boulders or something, sure. But there's also intellectual risk-taking. So if I know something and now you're going to push me a little bit past the level that I know, it makes me uncomfortable, but I still get challenged, and it triggers something in me that makes me a little bit uncomfortable, and that might be something that's missing because their teachers are not with them. And sometimes as a parent, it's hard to gauge how far to push them to where they disengage totally, right? So think about that. And the same with social and emotional, right? They're used to having teachers say, I want you to stand up in front of the class and share this idea. And that's intense, right? Or I want you to get in this group and work with these people, and they're not their best friends. That's intense. So those types of risk-taking things are not necessarily happening. And then the last two are pretty self-explanatory. If they're used to you going to work, and then when you come home, you give them a solid chunk of time when you get home, they're expecting you're home now, and they're kind of expecting that you will be fully engaged with them, right? So make sure that they're getting their time with you. And and classroom chats are great because it keeps the class connected, but are they getting chats with their good close friends? That's something that you have to arrange as a parent. And I'll end by saying that as adults, if your sleep is disturbed, you can use all of these things yourself, but also keep in mind your alcohol and your caffeine intake, because that could really be having an impact on the type of sleep that you're getting. Hopefully these tips work for you. Take care.